Today we're going to be talking about the Omen, and I don't mean the shitty-ass movie or its equally shitty remake. I mean the interesting, horned, cursed individuals we come across throughout the lands between. At first glance, they might resemble the Herald Knights of the Ringed City, with their massive cleavers and rather rotund frames. However, upon closer inspection, they seem to more closely resemble the ogres of Blighttown from the original Dark Souls that wielded poison clubs and hurled boulders at any who trespassed, possessing nearly the exact same build as the omens encountered across the lands between, although lacking the horns. Many even refer to the omens found in-game as ogres, which is a more or less fitting description given their hulking frames and brute strength. In short, omens are cursed people born with horns and other grotesque deformities. They are almost entirely ostracized by society. Those born with this supposed curse have their horns removed in infancy, often but not always resulting in the child's death. Those that were lucky enough to survive this were then enslaved and raised as warrior slaves. Even the weapons granted to these beings when they reached the heightened status of warrior slave were imbued with a type of malediction that would deteriorate the weapon if it needed to be taken from the Omen soldiers. These Omen soldiers were used similarly to the equally enslaved misbegotten and trolls we see throughout the lands between as heavy fighting units. An example of one of these enslaved omens can be found at Stormville Castle, in the company of some dogs and some exile soldiers, and a rather large group of them can be found in the Altus Plateau near the abandoned Coffin Grey site. These ones could have possibly escaped their enslavement, but it could go either way. They could also be acting as sentries here, which could be likely as we do see an Omen King currently on the throne in Lanedale, but again, all speculation. Although I do think it's safe to say that Morgott's title as the Omen King it likely just means that he is a king who is an omen and not the king of the omens, although that probably goes without saying. Now we know that the regular omens that survive having their horns cut off are used as slave soldiers for lords and nobles. What about ones born to lords and nobles? These regal omens do not have their horns removed and are instead kept in the sewers deep beneath the city of Lanedale, in an underground sewer system known as the Subterranean Shunning Grounds. Two famous examples of regal omens would be the twin sons of Godfrey and Marika, Morgott the Omen King and Mog the Lord of Blood, who I believe to be the adult versions or the full-sized versions of the fell twins that we fight at the Lanedale Divine Tower, although again just speculation. The rest of the Shunning Grounds are filled with what is likely several lesser royal omens, or possibly just omens that were born down there, as these brutes all still have all of their horns, as opposed to the ones we find elsewhere that are all lacking their horns. And it would definitely line up with the regal omen baron description that says that all these royal ones don't have their horns removed and are kept underground. It would also explain why you might be able to find two particular omens down in the sewers worshipping at what appears to be a statue of Marika, which could imply that some of these omens down here are descendants of maybe Numen women who happen to be loyal to Marika. The omen affliction itself could be seen as some sort of meddling by an outer god of some kind, or it could be a rotting in some manner of the Erd Tree. Some even have alleged that it's a sign that the age of the Erd Tree should end. However, if we look at things like the budding horn, which is found on herbivores, the description suggests a possible connection with the Crucible of Life, the ancient form of what the Erd Tree used to be, and of course the namesake of the Crucible Knights. Following that thread takes us to the Crucible Knot Talisman, which shares most of its text with the Crucible Scale and Crucible Feather talismans. A talisman fashioned from a bony knot that embodies the aspects of various creatures, said to have grown on the human body long ago. A vestige of the crucible of primordial life, born partially of devolution, it was considered a signifier of the divine in ancient times, but is now increasingly disdained as an impurity as civilization has advanced. This basically alleges that humans originally did have horns, way back before the age of the Erd Tree. One interesting takeaway from this description could be the fact that it mentions that the knots were born partially of devolution, which could imply that the omen curse or affliction is simply just humanity regressing back to its natural state after having suffered under the age of the Erd Tree for God knows how long. Because as we know, the Erd Trees are simply a conduit that the space god Elden Ring uses to siphon power from the lands between, and we see during his fight that there's several other Erd Trees off in the distance, so perhaps there's more than one lands between or area that he siphons power from. Again, that's deep tinfoil hat theory. Also, the last bit of the description seems to reference the omens specifically when it says that the horns were once considered a signifier of the divine back in the day, but now they're seen as impure and cursed. Now, If that doesn't sound like they got dealt a fucked hand, it gets even worse, or better depending on who you are. There was also a whole order of warriors and perfumers dedicated to hunting down and killing these poor bastards. It is said that the average omen is plagued by nightmares, hosted by evil demonic-looking horned spirits. The order of Omen Killers, founded by Rollo, fashioned masks like these, and wore them as a point of pride as they carried out their nightmarish work using literal cleavers made from the severed infant horns of dead omens. The Omen Killers were literally as metal as it gets. Another interesting observation is that some of the sewer omens seem to possess one of those cleavers I mentioned earlier, suggesting that these horned royal omens were also used as warriors in some regard, and we do in fact see the particularly famous example of an omen I mentioned earlier, Morgoth the Omen King, or Margit the Fell Omen. In the opening cinematic, we see he's bested Radon, or at least he's pinned him. Well, we do know that Radon was in fact drove back from the capital, so I think it's safe to say that Morgoth defeated him. The brute strength he got from his omen status likely had something to do with this, as Radon is often called the strongest demigod, although I think that ranking doesn't really factor in Mog and Morgoth, as they were kept secret and hidden away. Morgoth and his brother Mog also appear to be able to create copies of themselves, albeit weaker ones, as we encounter Mog in 2 places and Morgoth in potentially 3 different locations, all with dialogue. Every omen also has a shackle, and Mog and Morgoth were no different. It's tough to say who made these shackles, but going forward we do know that they are able to bind these particularly powerful demigods to Earth for a short period of time, at least in their first phases. The shackles themselves we also can see on any omen warrior in the game dragging behind them, which could just be a reference to the fact that they were enslaved, or perhaps a portion of their power is dampened by the shackles. The shackles themselves are likely another instrument of control and humiliation, as we see have become a common theme when it comes to the omens. Despite their almost universal pariah status, there are those who do revere the omens. We see that the omens possess the ability to spit wraiths at us in combat. This is likely due to the omen's association with the spirits of the dead, as mentioned in the description for the seedbed curse, and reinforced by the wraith calling bells description, which describes the gold-tinged wraiths as the vengeful spirits of those who died cursed and couldn't return to the Erd Tree. Due to these descriptions and the fact that so few enemies in the game are even associated with the wraiths, it appears that the wraith callers seem to revere the omens in some way or another, which could possibly make them the mysterious makers of the Omen Baron and the Regal Omen Baron, who I still haven't figured out who made. It should be noted though that the Wraith Calling Bells wraiths do magic damage and that the Omen Baron's ones do holy damage. Now, whether this is a gameplay oversight or intentional is really up for debate, but if it is intentional, it could mean that there is no association between the Wraith Callers and Omens. Just felt like I needed to add that. There's also the Dung Eater, a legendary tarnished who was said to have possessed the heart of an omen without the body to match. He clearly appears to feel some sort of spiritual kinship to the omens, having been imprisoned in the sewers, and refers to himself as cursed by America, although this could be referring to his tarnished status. There's also the fact that he wishes to curse the world, which you the player can help him do if you so desire. Shit, it's the only ending I see that actually has actual equality for everyone. There's also a lot more to the Dung Eater's motives and morals that probably warrant a whole video, but popular theory I saw was that he was the parent of a child that was born an omen, and likely the kid died when they cut the horns off. That led him to go mad and hate the gods and want them all to suffer like he did, which is, definitely a possibility. Although I suppose that might make him a bit too sympathetic. He also brutally murders and then defiles the Prawn Man, which is pretty fucked up if you ask me. But basically, the manner in which the Dung Eater kills people, he defiles them and leaves a seedbed curse on them, which breeds the curse and keeps the dead soul from returning to the Erd Tree, which then turns that dead person into a wraith. And the last thing is, earlier in the video I alleged that the Fell Twins boss fight was actually a young version of Margit the Fell, or Morgoth, and his brother Mog. There isn't a whole lot of evidence really to support this, other than the fact that they're guarding the tower in which you use to activate their respective great runes. They're a pair of omens that are explicitly named twins, just like Mog and Morgoth, and it appears they still have their horns. They're also the only 2 bosses known to have shown to create apparitions of themselves, so why wouldn't they be able to create an apparition of younger versions of themselves to guard a specific place, perhaps where they were kept for a long period of time? It's really just speculation, as I love to say, but that's what makes it so fun. So in conclusion, the omens are just people born with horns and considered cursed from birth, ostracized by society, and used only for their brute strength in the form of warrior slaves. They're pretty much treated horribly. They're only revered by the wretches of society. Although in actuality the curse itself could be a sign of the crucible seeping back into humans. And when an omen dies, apparently his spirit does not return to the Erd tree. Same as when the dung eater kills someone and defiles their body, which may have something to do with their ability to spit wraiths. I'm trying to make these videos a little more organized as I go, but I hope you liked it. I hope you found it informative. Yeah, if you liked it, please like and subscribe. Comment if I missed anything. Comment if I misinterpreted anything, if I got anything wrong, or just if you have any alter theories. I like discussing shit in the comments. But I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Serves me right. Fitting bloody hell. For a jumped up little shit with big ideas. Help me out. Would you, mate? I don't want to get cursed. Just let me die. I don't want to live like this. Not anymore. So, please.